Dive into the Discovery Doc podcast with Dr. Demartini as we decode the mind-body connection, societal impacts on health decisions, and the hidden dangers of mycotoxins. Plus, we'll bust the myth of the U.S. healthcare system's superiority. Tune in, share, and transform your well-being.
The Discovery Doc podcast, where your journey to empowered, non-toxic living begins. Join me, Dr. Cece, a doctor of nursing practice, self-proclaimed toxin tamer, and mama of four, alongside
me, Anna Kate, your medical mystery overachiever. Together, we'll uncover the latest in functional medicine, debunk health myths, tame toxins, and provide practical tips for thriving in a modern world.
Get ready to take control of your health with expert insights, raw stories, and actionable wellness strategies designed to help you and your family lead vibrant, toxin-free lives. Let's discover together.
Welcome to the Discovery Doc podcast. I'm here with your host,
Dr. Cece, and we have Dr. Demartini on our podcast today with us. We are so excited. He is a human behavior expert, philosopher, and speaker. Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you just give our audience a quick background about you? Who are you? What's your background? And how did you get to just become who you are today?
In the 1 minute version, I call myself a teacher or educator. I travel around the world. I am going on my 53rd year of teaching. And anything to do with maximizing human awareness and potential and maximizing, fulfillment in life is what I've been up to since 1972. And I research and write every day. I travel most every day. And my background is quite diverse. I've been blessed to speak all over the world. So right now I'm in an island out in the Caribbean, St. George's Island, Grenada, and I get to be speaking to you in Georgia.
So can you give us a little bit of, we'll dive in. Can you talk to us about how just our thoughts, our emotions, and our belief can truly shape our physical health?
Anytime we perceive some stimulus, which could be an individual, it could be an animal, it could be an event, any person, place, thing, idea, event, in a way where we're conscious of the upsides, but unconscious of the downsides. We take that sensory information, filter it through our thalamus. It then goes off to the amygdala. The amygdala assigns a valency to it, labels it something like a prey or pleasurable, and we activate an impulse to seek it out, to search for it, to want to get close to it. We see it as a prey, something we want to consume. When it does, it activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is for rest and digest, and that impacts epigenetics and cell physiology and creates symptomatology that lets us know that we have food. We have something we seek and something we want. And so our body responds to every perception, down to the cell level, down to the epigenetic level, down to the biochemical and literally the enzyme level and the mitochondria and ATP. Anytime we see something and perceive something that we see that has more drawbacks and benefits and challenges us, it represents a predator, something that we want to avoid. That activates, again, through the thalamus and to the amygdala, and assigns a valency into the hippocampus and causes an avoidance response and changes the chemistry. When we seek something, we get oxytocin and vasopressin and dopamine and serotonin and estrogen and enkephalins and endorphins, and we get a good feeling, and we have a pleasure feeling, a hedonistic feeling that makes us want to eat it and consume it. And the other one creates a nociception, a pain response, and activates osteocalcin and testosterone and cortisol and substance P and other chemistry. So our chemistry of our brain is altered by our perceptions, and the various areas of the autonomic nervous system affect the cells to create symptoms. And the symptoms, we've been misled, in my opinion, by the approach that's being done in healthcare And we assume that if we have a symptom that's something bad and you need to take a pharmaceutical, and that whole model is an opium consumer model, in my opinion. But I really believe that our body is creating symptoms as a feedback to guide us on how to re-perceive our events in a more balanced way. For instance, if we overeat and we get cramps and bloated and have puffy eyes and fatigue and things, you go to a general practitioner, you might think, well, you need an antacid, an anti-flatulent, an antihistamine, an anti-algic, and they give you a bunch of medications to get rid of the symptoms, but the symptoms are not your enemy. The symptoms are your friends trying to teach you that you ate more than required and that your body is trying to help you guide your life into moderation and wisdom and authenticity. See, when we infatuate with something and we admire it, we tend to minimize ourselves to it. And we're too humble to admit what we see in that inside ourselves. And we resent something, we tend to exaggerate ourselves. We're too proud to admit what we see in them inside us. And anytime we judge things on the outside, we become inauthentic on the inside, and we become proud or shamed and exaggerate or minimized to who we actually are. And then we create symptoms to try to bring those back into balance so we can be authentic, because our maximum potential sits at authenticity. It doesn't sit when we exaggerate or minimize ourselves. When we exaggerate ourselves, we tend to project our values onto other people and try to get them to live in our values, which is futile. When we minimize ourselves, we try to live in other people's values that we've injected, which is futile. So the futility and the symptomatology is our friend guiding us how to be authentic, how to be moderate and wise, and how to live, in a sense, with full potential, where we're most effective and efficient at learning how to express what we love in terms of what other people love, so there can be sustainable, fair exchange and productivity and utility.
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
That's a lot. That's a lot to unpack.
Yes, but golf clap for all of that. And something that resonated with me specifically that I talk to my patients about is, and a little bit different, but same thought process, is someone who comes with certain autoimmune diseases. These antibodies, I say this all the time, these antibodies don't just turn on for no reason. They are trying to protect you. They are going after something to try to protect you. What are they going after to try to protect you from?
Mm-hmm.
Those symptoms of that autoimmune disease, just like you said, they are not there to hurt you, but they are flags telling you that your body needs to recalibrate, that something is off. So let's go find it. What is it? Go ahead.
In 1973, when I first started studying autoimmune conditions, there were only 6 labeled. Now there's 600. And the immune system was considered to be the immune system was considered to be something to protect yourself from predator. That model is now gone. They now know that the immune system is the 7th sense. We now know that the vagus nerve takes microbiome information from the microbes and takes information through the afferent sensory pathways up into the nucleus solitarius and goes up and actually gives the brain feedback, bottom up and top down, to regulate and bring homeostasis to physiology. So it's now a wildlife management system more so than a protective system. And we now know that when we are actually in shame, when we blame other people, we are pointing our finger at somebody else, but 3 are back at ourselves. And the thing we blame at is what that represents the thing that we're ashamed of, but dissociated from, and going into pride to protect ourselves from feeling the shame, but we're blaming them for it. And when we want to attack them as a predator, we're attacking ourselves, and our immune system is attacking the cells that represent the associations with what we feel ashamed about and humiliated about and self-depreciated about. So the immune system is letting us know when we're not loving and authentic again. It's guiding us, because when we go in there and help people love themselves, the immune response and autoimmune conditions dissolve.
Yes.
Yep.
And some with my patients, I have 2 kind of separate, distinct patient populations when it comes to patients who are chronically ill or experience chronic symptoms. There was one subset that just the mental fortitude is undeniable. And those are my patients that get better so much quicker. And then there's a subset of patients who have become engulfed in those diagnoses, in those symptoms. It's part of their identity. And they can walk in with their, labs are labs are labs. I say that it's numbers on a piece of paper that doesn't tell us truly intracellular what's happening. But those patients, you can clear everything and not a symptom budges. And because it's the psyche, it's the mindset that they're so engulfed with, everything that you're saying that is creating and truly true symptoms, but they're still truly, experiencing those symptoms because of that aspect. I find this very fascinating.
Which is why when I walk into a doctor's office, nobody thinks I'm sick because of the way that I present.
Yeah.
And my mindset is, I have this. This is not who I am. I'm not going to keep it.
Yeah.
I had Lyme disease.
It's not mine.
I don't have it anymore. God gave me this for a reason. We're going to take it. We're going to turn the mess into a message, but I'm not keeping this. This is not my identity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's one of the things that I coach on when people come to me and they're like, hey, how do you navigate this? And I was like, well, one thing is you have to have a positive mindset because your body doesn't know the difference between truth and or what you make up in reality. So you better make up whatever you're making up, better fit with reality to move you in a positive direction, because your brain and your body are going to believe the thoughts that you think, the 70 million thoughts that you think every day.
Well, the body is more truthful than our words. And our subconscious mind, which is basically the valent perceptions we store in our hippocampus, reveal the unconscious motives and the strategies that we use to create symptoms to try to reveal to us what we're overlooking. And we basically want to deny our addiction. Our addiction in pride is a result of our amygdala's desire center. Our amygdala wants pride. It wants to show off its pride and wants to avoid shame. And it wants a fantasy of pleasure without pain, instead of embracing the truth about life, which is always a balance of the pairs of opposites, a unity of opposites. So we have unconscious motives and strategies. I'd like to share a couple stories, if I could, on that might be useful. Had a lady at the Merriam Hotel in Dublin, Ireland, who met with me for a consult. She claims she had had symptoms and pain since childhood. She was 57, but claimed to be in pain most all her life. And nobody in all the history that she had, and she's been to all kind of specialists, ever asked her, what's the benefit you're getting out of the pain? And I asked her that, and she dodged the question a few times. And I said, so please answer the question. I believe it will be eye-opening. So what's the benefit of getting out of pain? I can't see any. What's the benefit of getting out of pain? I can't find it. What's the benefit? I can't think of any. Answer the question. What's the benefit of getting? Because nobody will continue to do something unless they consciously or unconsciously have more advantage and disadvantage. They won't continue it. The brain won't do it. So what's the unconscious motive we're finding? Finally, she said, my sister, when I was young, was a very attractive girl. She's a very intelligent girl, very athletic girl. There was no way I could compete with her as a child for attention from the parents. But if I got injured, they forsaked her and came to me and took care of me. So I learned a strategy that as long as I get myself injured or show signs or symptoms or sickness and show pain, if my pain is greater than the pleasure they're getting out of her, they immediately give attention to me. And she's finally realized that she was using that as a strategy her whole life to get people to acknowledge her. Because, if you get puffed up, people will bring you down. If you get humble, they'll lift you up. So she was basically looking for attention to be lifted up most all her life, and she used her pain and symptoms as a strategy. So I asked her, what's the benefit? And she finally looked at me and started breaking down in tears. And she said, is it possible that I've done this my whole life? And I said, you tell me. And she cried, and I mean really cried, and realized she knew inside that she was using that. There's a thing called glial pain, and there's acute neurological pain. And glial pain is activated by intention, unconscious or conscious intention. Neurological pain is when you have sort of ischemia and some sort of injury to a cell, and it creates a it's a bottom up cell to brain thalamus, lateral spinal thalamus tract. But the other one is from the cortex down, from the glial, the oligodendrocytes, and the astrocytes and microglia. So here we have a lady that all of a sudden had this realization. Now, 57 years of so-called pain. Well, as far as you can remember, probably 55 or something. But the reality is, when she was through, I said, just out of curiosity, what's happening with your pain? She said it's about a 3 now from about a 9. A month later, after doing it, she realized, because her pain was down at a 3, not a, it wasn't there. It wasn't running her life anymore, because she had a realization that there were viable alternative ways of getting attention and getting what she wanted instead of just using pain. But children sometimes use pain when they got a bully at school. And children sometimes do it when they don't want to have to go to a test. And they do that. But if we support people, there's a benefit of compassion. There's also a drawback, because sometimes we sit there and disable and enable people and support their story, their victim story, instead of help them, as Emerson says, hit them with rough electric shocks and get them back in touch with reason again, and make them realize that they're the creation of their reality instead of the realities doing it to them. It's not in the way, it's on the way. And it's not an outside thing, it's an inside perception of what's going on. William James said that the greatest discovery of his generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. And we have the capacity to transform whatever happens to us into an opportunity and do something amazing with it. It's up to us. We can basically succumb to it and basically want to label it and then say that it did this to us and this disease is doing this. Or we can use this disease or illness or symptoms or events and turn it into amazing opportunities. And that's why the more we learn about our psychology and our physiology, the more empowered we are.
Yes, absolutely. So a deep dive question for you, and I have my thoughts on it, but I want to hear yours. The impact, there are clearly very personal reasons as to why that could happen, right? Maybe past trauma, maybe, some sort of just, want for love or affection or whatever it might be to fill some sort of void that you have from your childhood. Makes complete sense. What about society, though? What about society as a whole just impacting or influencing that thought process as well? Because we are inundated with commercials, with billboards, with social media that is filled with just take this medication. It's constantly around us, chronically ill, symptoms, blah, blah, blah. What, in your opinion, contributes to that whole philosophy as society as a whole?
Well, I said in the movie The Secret 19 years ago, when the voice and the vision on the inside is louder than all opinions on the outside, you begin to master your life. If you meet somebody and you look down on them, you don't inculcate and inject their values into your life. But if you exaggerate them and minimize yourself, you'll tend to inject their values into your life. So it's not the social media doing it to you. It's your interpretation of the people on the social media. If you think they're more of an authority than yourself, you will inject the values of their authority into your life and then subordinate to the misinformation many times, or the moral hypocrisies that are being promulgated. And you can basically then try to live that which is unobtainable. I always say that, in childhood, they'd say, now be nice, don't be mean, be kind, don't be cruel. And then 5 minutes later, the person that tells you that goes and beats up grandpa. So we go around and we have moral hypocrisies. And Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize winner, said it's not that we don't know so much, it's we know so much that isn't so. We're bombarded by misinformation. The truth has never been in the hands of the masses. It's always been in the hearts of the masters. So if you go by mass media and run your life by mass media, you're probably going to be misinformed, because what sells there is sensationalism and opinions and polarities and extremes. The wise individual will go and fill their brain with high priority information that stands the test of time, and they feed their mind with wisdom and true love and not fantasies. So it's not the social media. You can select out of the social media wisely, wise information, and use it to your advantage. or you can succumb to the misinformation and the impulses and instincts of the masses. It's totally up to you what you want to do. So I don't have a judgment. I try to feed as much as I can into social media, as much information that I think will be helpful to people. But you are wise to be selective. If you're not prioritizing what you're feeding your mind, if you're not prioritizing what you're thinking, not prioritizing what you're eating, not prioritizing who you associate with, well, then that's you. That's not the world around you. That's your decision. You have control over perceptions, decisions, and actions in life, nothing else. So if you don't prioritize your perception, decisions, and actions, the world on the outside is probably going to influence the world on the inside. But if you want to make a difference, it's not conforming to the outside. It's enorming the inside and doing something extraordinary from within and having the resistance from without at first, but eventually you're appreciated for being unique and make the difference. You won't make a difference being fit into what everybody else is telling you. You'll make a difference by standing strong in something you've discovered that's deeply meaningful to you, that's inspiring.
Yep. All right. You have your doctor's orders. We are going to continue our conversation with Dr. Demartini next week. So make sure that you do the homework that he just gave you. Go and use your brain.
Use it well.
Yeah, yes. So just put on a little filter as you go into social media, and just, fact check, do all the things. But we're going to come back next week with Dr. Demartini, so you don't want to miss that. Are you ready to explore health and practical tips and a guidance to optimize your daily habits? Jumpstart your transformation with 5 freebies delivered straight to your inbox. We're going to give you access to our vault. So click the link in the description and we'll send that directly to you. We are exposed to more toxins than we realize, from food we eat to the products we trust. But what's really in these everyday items? How can we reduce our exposure? And in today's Toxin Tamer, we're going to be breaking down mycotoxins.
Dun, dun, dun. Mycotoxins. What do you know about mycotoxins?
That I have them and I don't want them.
I was about to make a very inappropriate joke, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, mycotoxins. So this is a really big category, and the toxin of this month, again, is mycotoxins, specifically in food, but we are going to dive a little bit deeper into the medical side of things because it's something Anna Kate, unfortunately, as a patient has experienced, and I, as a practitioner, see all the time. So what are mycotoxins? Give me your definition. Do you know?
It's a mold or a Is it fungus? No, it's mold.
Yeah,
it's a fungus.
I mean, mold and fungus are
that
changeable.
Gets on things and we eat them or we breathe them, and they shouldn't be on that food or in those places, and it wreaks havoc and it's no fun.
That's one of her definitions.
That's my definition.
Yes. So the formal definition, mycotoxins are toxic secondary metabolites produced by mold. So I like to explain it to patients that they're like little children, unfortunately, of mold species that just kind of vacate and go places that they shouldn't be, but they are produced by mold species. Aspergillus is a very common one. Penicillium is a very common one. Fusarium is a very common mold species that we see in food specifically. There are tons that we test for in functional medicine, which we'll get to in a minute, but these toxins are invisible. You can't see them. They're tasteless. They're also heat resistant. So meaning that in our food processing, they can survive that roasting or high temperatures, which makes them more susceptible in moist or warm weather environments. Mm-hmm. Did that make sense? Warm weather environments. Warm environments.
Warm environments.
I think I didn't need weather
there.
So
food that comes from equator countries, one of her favorite things. I don't drink it anymore.
Oh, coffee.
We'll get into that.
No.
But it's, so you'll see that on a bag, it'll say single origin or mold free, which means that it's should be mycotoxin free.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that in a minute. But go tell us where, kind of how this all started back in the 60s.
So history of mycotoxins, I think is interesting. I never really delved into the history a little bit, but alpha toxin contamination in animal feed was a big issue back in the 60s. There was this mass poultry die-off in England. Poor things. And the culprit was peanut meal contaminated with alpha toxins from mold. And this kind of catapulted the global research on mycotoxins and the risks in food for humans as well as in animal feed. Fast forward to the 70s and 80s, the FDA started to regulate alpha toxins specifically in food. And so they set limits on how much we could have or how much was allowed in human food and in animal feed. But that threshold is very controversial. Even the smallest amounts have been linked to liver cancer and immune suppression. And the United States limits, and this is probably my biggest bone to pick, but the United States limits, as always, are far higher than Europe's stricter regulations. So, for example, the US limits alpha toxins specifically to 20 parts per billion, whereas Europe regulates it to 4 parts per
So we're 5 times more allowing.
Yes. Go figure. Anywho, moving on to the 90s and 2000s, this is where there was kind of an uptick in the concern around coffee and processed foods with mycotoxins. So studies were finding that high okra toxins specifically were being found in coffee and cereal products, dried fruits as well, or a big one in there. Wine, unfortunately, we'll get to. Ooh, I'm giving too much information away.
Okay, just teasing it out.
Exactly. And large brands, including organic brands, were found to contain mold contaminated beans as well. So in the next kind of decade or so, kind of to present as well, the FDA, and nothing's really changed. The FDA still allows small amounts of alpha toxins or mycotoxins in the food. The biggest hiccup here is that there is no mandate for third-party testing. There is no mandate for mycotoxin testing. So you, quote, allow a certain amount of mycotoxins in food, but no one's actually testing to see.
Right. When you hear the word is not approved by the FDA, but the FDA approves 20 parts per million of mold.
Per billion.
Per billion?
Per billion, ppb per billion.
Per billion to be in your food. They're authorizing that the FDA says it's okay for you to have mycotoxin in your food and it's safe.
Yes.
So I'm going to take that 3-letter agency and
chuck it. Anywho, still to this day, Europe has stricter regulations, and actually many mycotoxin contaminated products are banned there because it's and we'll get into this, but it is well known that even low dose exposure can contribute to things like brain fog and digestive issues, hormone imbalances, and inflammation. So yes, my bone to pick here is that we as the United States allow more parts per billion than other countries, and we also do not mandate third-party testing or any testing, therefore, when it comes to protecting our society from mold in our food.
So use your awareness, use your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Make decisions.
Good ones.
Yeah.
Not just decisions, good decisions.
Good decisions. I thought that was implied. Make better decisions. Make well-informed decisions.
Yeah.
How about that? All right. Speaking of well-informed decisions, knowledge is power, but it's better when it's shared. Did you learn something? Did someone come to mind while you were listening to this segment in this episode? Go ahead and share this episode with them because caring is sharing. Sharing is caring. Both of them.
Nailed this. Nailed it today.
Mm-hmm. Good. Send it to somebody you love. You've heard the claims. But are they fact or fiction? Today, we're busting one of the biggest health myths out there. The U.S. healthcare system is the best in the world.
False. Buzzer. Red buzzer. So the U.S. spends more on healthcare per capita than any other country.
Should be sick care.
Yes.
It's not healthcare. It's not well care. It's sick care.
It is sick care. And yet, the health outcomes are poor. So we spend the most, but the outcomes and key health indicators are poor. Y'all let that sit in. I'm going to say it again. We spend the most, but the outcomes of key health indicators are poor. How? If you have the most money to spend on the best healthcare in the world, how are we one of the sickest countries? Make it make sense. Anyways, the United States ranks 29th in life expectancy among high-income nations, and maternal mortality rates are higher than any other developed nation. Yes, listen to this. According to the CDC, the maternal mortality risk, deaths of pregnant mamas in the United States are 22.3 deaths per 100,000 live births. 22.3 thousand, or 22.3 deaths per 100,000. In other countries like Canada, 11 per 100,000, or the UK, 13 per 100,000. We are double these other countries, double other countries who are, kind of on that equal realm of income, finances, whatever you want to call it.
Like first world countries.
First world countries, yes. Double the mortality rate of pregnant moms, okay? In the United States, approximately 6 out of 10 adults have at least one chronic disease. 40% have 2 or more. More than half of older adults have 3 or more chronic conditions. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, amongst the most of them, the majority of them. And those chronic diseases are the leading causes of death in the United States, with heart disease and cancer being the leading culprits. About 40% of all deaths come from those two. Okay, 40% of all deaths. We're going heavy on the statistics here because it's
lots
important.
of numbers today.
90% of the nation's $4.5 trillion in annual health care, 90% goes towards people with chronic conditions. 90%. So just based on those stats.
And it's 100% not covered.
Right.
That make sense.
Just on those stats alone, no, it is so false. We do not have the best healthcare system, and it's such I don't know what the heck the United States has done to market itself as the best country in the world when it comes to healthcare, because I know I've been places where there's people trying to come to the United States for our healthcare, for operations, for other things that maybe they don't have access to, without realizing that, you are coming to a place that is sicker than your country. It is absolutely baffling. And if you go even a step further, our access to care is not wonderful. The United States has a vast disparity in healthcare access. There are, and to me, I take this with a grain of salt, right? Because I have my thing with insurance companies, and that's completely my opinion. So out of my opinion, there are over 30 million people that are uninsured. So we rely heavily on this fact that the United States, you get all these things covered by insurance, but then you leave 30 million people without that insurance, and millions of more are underinsured, which leads to a delay in care sometimes. Now, again, I have my thoughts and feelings on the origins of that and insurance being the scam itself, but still, it is the point that the United States kind of prides itself on all this access to private insurance or public funded insurance, yet there are so many people that don't have access to it. And despite kind of all these arguments going on in the United States system, many experts, including the World Health Organization, have rated the United States healthcare system as poor when it compares to other countries that use different systems that we do, but still there's lower cost, there's higher access to care, and they have better health outcomes.
And we have the money and the resources to do it right and choose not to.
Yes. So false. This is a false.
Big fat goose egg. All right. Until next time.
Let's discover together.
And that's a wrap for another enlightening episode of the Discovery Doc podcast. We hope Dr. Demartini's wisdom on the mind-body connection and societal influences on our health decisions has inspired you. Remember to be mindful of those hidden toxins in your daily indulgences and share this knowledge with your loved ones. Stay tuned for more myth-busting, expert insights, and transformative health tips on the Discovery Doc podcast. Together, let's empower ourselves and our communities on the journey toward optimal well-being. See you next time.
Hold your horses. Before we ride off into the sunset, let's take a moment for a friendly disclaimer. The information shared on this podcast is for general, informational, and entertainment purposes only. While we strive to provide accurate and helpful information, we're not here to replace your trusty healthcare provider or doctor. Consider us your Discovery Doc trailblazers, sharing our knowledge and experiences as we journey forward towards wellness. However, remember to always consult with a qualified medical professional before taking any action based on the content of this episode. Like the Wild West adventure, this disclaimer may change occasionally, so be sure to check back for updates. Stay healthy, stay adventurous, and keep blazing trails with the Discovery Doc.